Bitcoin will hit $1 million per coin. That's not my prediction. That's coming from Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase. And before you roll your eyes, understand this. Armstrong isn't some random Twitter bull shouting numbers for clout. He runs the largest crypto exchange in America. He's advising governments, sovereign wealth funds, and some of the biggest institutions in the world. And now, he's betting Bitcoin will hit $1 million by 2030. So what does he see that most people don't? And why could he be right? Let's break it all down. Brian Armstrong is not just another voice in the crypto space. He's one of the most influential figures shaping the entire industry. Back in 2012, when most people had barely even heard of Bitcoin, Armstrong was already building Coinbase from scratch. His vision was simple but bold: make crypto accessible to the world. Fast forward almost a decade later, and he took that vision public. In April 2021, Coinbase became the first major US crypto exchange to IPO. That single event legitimized the entire sector in the eyes of mainstream finance. Today, Coinbase isn't just an exchange. It's a global financial powerhouse serving more than 100 million people across over 100 countries. And here's the part most people don't realize. Armstrong and Coinbase also work directly with governments. More than 140 different government entities, federal, state, local, and international, rely on Coinbase for crypto services. That means Armstrong isn't just watching the crypto revolution from the sidelines. He's sitting in the middle of it. So when Armstrong steps up and makes a bold prediction about where Bitcoin is headed, it's not the same as some anonymous influencer calling numbers on Twitter. It carries real weight. Here's the line straight from Armstrong himself.
What is your prediction for the 10-year rate of growth, like average annual growth in the Bitcoin price?
You know, the rough idea I have in my head is like, we'll see $1 million Bitcoin by 2030. And there's high error bars around these things.
He does admit that there are high error bars. In other words, a wide range of outcomes. But the fact he's even willing to say $1 million out loud tells you just how confident he is. So let's break down the 5 big reasons Armstrong sees Bitcoin going this high. For years, the biggest risk in Bitcoin was always this: what if governments shut it down? Armstrong says that risk is now severely diminished. The United States has already passed the Genius Act, a landmark stablecoin law requiring reserves to be fully backed by dollars or treasuries. And a broader market structure bill is being debated in the Senate that could finally settle the question of which assets are securities and which aren't. Armstrong puts it bluntly.
We're starting to see regulatory clarity emerge in the United States, which I think is a bellwether for the rest of the G20. You have the Genius Act passed now for stablecoins, but this market structure bill is being debated in the Senate. Fingers crossed something could happen by the end of this year. That would be a huge milestone.
Translation: once the US puts real rules on the books, other nations will follow. And when institutions know the rules of the game, that's when they move in. This one is huge. Armstrong points out that the United States government now has a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Think about how insane that is. 5 years ago, people would have laughed at the idea of the US holding Bitcoin. Today, there's an executive order to do exactly that. And here's the kicker. Once the US starts officially holding BTC, other countries will follow. It's the domino effect. One nation state adopts, and suddenly it becomes a race not to be left behind. Coinbase itself already works with governments in 140 jurisdictions, meaning Armstrong is seeing sovereign-level interest before it even hits the news. This isn't retail FOMO. It's global adoption at the state level. This might be the biggest driver of all. Armstrong says that most large institutions he talks to only hold about 1% of their portfolio in Bitcoin, and they all tell him the same thing. They'll move to 5 to 10% allocations once regulatory clarity lands. That's a 5x to 10x increase in institutional exposure. And remember, these aren't small players. We're talking about sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, and global asset managers controlling trillions of dollars. We've already seen the first wave with BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF, which has hoovered up billions in just months. Now imagine what happens when every wealth manager on Wall Street decides Bitcoin deserves a place in their portfolios. Armstrong says it himself.
The big institutions I talk to, they're holding 1% of the portfolio in Bitcoin. And I'm like, what would it be to 5 to 10? And they say, regulatory clarity, that's it. So I think we'll continue to see huge inflows of capital. The ETFs have been huge.
And those inflows aren't stopping anytime soon. Here's where the numbers really get wild. Armstrong compares Bitcoin directly to gold, calling it a non-productive store of wealth. And he means that as a compliment, because for centuries, gold has been the ultimate safe haven. Civilizations have risen and fallen, currencies have collapsed, empires have come and gone, and through it all, gold has remained the foundation of wealth. Today, its market cap sits at roughly $23 trillion. Bitcoin, by comparison, is only about $2.3 trillion. That's barely a fraction. If Bitcoin simply closes that gap, if it just earns the same respect as gold, you're looking at a 10x move from here. That alone would push Bitcoin to over $1 million per coin. But Armstrong believes it won't stop there. Because while gold has history, Bitcoin has math. Gold is scarce, but no one can tell you the exact supply. With Bitcoin, we know there will never be more than 21 million, not one coin more. Gold is heavy, expensive to store, costly to move across borders. Bitcoin, on the other hand, is weightless. You can transfer billions in value in minutes for a few dollars in fees. And unlike gold, Bitcoin is programmable. It can integrate into financial systems, be used as collateral, and interact with smart contracts across the digital economy. That's why Armstrong sees Bitcoin not just as gold 2.0, but as something fundamentally superior. A harder asset, a more liquid asset, a global, borderless store of value for the digital age. Gold was the safe haven of the 20th century. Bitcoin is the safe haven of the 21st. Finally, Armstrong says the list of existential risks around Bitcoin has been shrinking dramatically. For years, the biggest question was whether governments would simply try to shut it down. That fear has faded. Instead of bans, we're seeing regulation, strategic reserves, and integration into the global financial system. There was also the worry about flaws in the Bitcoin protocol itself, a bug or weakness that could bring the whole thing crashing down. But after 15 years of non-stop stress testing, Armstrong believes those concerns have been severely combed over. Even quantum computing, often raised as the ultimate long-term threat, is being prepared for today, with proposals for post-quantum cryptography upgrades. The reality is simple. The longer Bitcoin survives, the stronger it gets. That's the Lindy effect. Each year it lives, the odds of it living another year only go up. And right now, Bitcoin doesn't just look resilient, it looks unstoppable. There's one more piece Armstrong emphasizes, and it's not Bitcoin directly, but it's critical. We're talking about stablecoins. Thanks to the Genius Act, US-backed stablecoins are now fully legal and federally approved. That unlocks a global payment rail that is fast, cheap, and universal. Payments settle in under 1 second. Fees cost about 1 cent, and they work anywhere in the world. Armstrong says this has triggered a gold rush among corporations, all scrambling to integrate stablecoins into their business models. And here's the connection. Once trillions of dollars flow into stablecoin rails, Bitcoin becomes the apex asset of that system. Stablecoins bring the money in. Bitcoin captures the store of value. So how do you get from today's approximately 112,000 Bitcoin to $1 million by 2030? Armstrong lays out a roadmap that, when you follow the pieces, starts to feel less like speculation and more like a chain reaction. First, regulatory clarity opens the floodgates. With the rules of the game established, sovereign wealth funds and pension funds, the biggest pools of capital in the world, finally step in. At the same time, governments themselves begin accumulating reserves, not wanting to be left behind in a global race. Institutions that today only hold 1% allocations move toward 5% or even 10%. Bitcoin begins to challenge gold's $15 trillion market cap and, in Armstrong's view, eventually surpasses it. Meanwhile, stablecoins create a frictionless global payment rail that brings billions of people into the crypto ecosystem for the first time. And with every year that passes, the risks grow smaller, the trust grows larger, and Bitcoin's survival becomes more certain. Stack all of these catalysts together, and suddenly $1 million Bitcoin doesn't sound outrageous. It starts to look inevitable. $1 million Bitcoin sounds insane until you realize the pieces are already falling into place. The US government is holding reserves. BlackRock is hoovering up supply. Stablecoins are exploding worldwide, and institutions controlling trillions are just waiting for the green light. Brian Armstrong isn't saying this for clicks. He's saying it because he sees the money flows building behind the scenes. Could he be wrong? Of course. His own words admit high error bars. But here's the real question. What if he's right? Because if Armstrong is even half right, Bitcoin still has the potential to multiply from here. If you've made it this far, you're clearly serious about Bitcoin. So do yourself one quick favor. Hit the first link in the description and sign up for our free daily email, Crypto Nutshell. Every morning, in under 5 minutes, we cover the biggest Bitcoin and crypto news, expert predictions, and on-chain insights you need to stay ahead. It's fast, it's free, and it's trusted by over 90,000 investors already. Click the link, enter your email, and you'll get tomorrow's issue straight to your inbox. Because if Bitcoin really is heading to $1 million, you can't afford to be out of the loop.